I'm an Indigenous Studies major, so I've learned a great deal about the history of the Metis people. And so a class I just finished is called Indigenous Studies 280. And in that class, one of the most important assignments is a genealogical review. So it took, I don't know how many hours, but just looking through church records, marriage records, and researching my genealogy, learning about, I have a Métis card, but what does that really mean? What were my ancestors doing? Where do they live? All these things. So I learned that my First Nations family comes from Swampy Cree First Nation, which is in Manitoba. And I have a great deal of grandfathers who were involved in the HBC, so the Hudson's Bay Company. Some of them aren't exactly remembered fondly, but it's still important to learn about all that. So yeah, and so one of the things that I've learned a lot through my program is that being a person with very white skin, I have privilege just like any other settler does. I'm totally present as a white person, and I always make sure to make that known, because when you talk about being Indigenous and you look like me, sometimes that can ruffle a few feathers. But yeah, I always want to make that known that I'm very aware of my privilege, but my family comes from the fur trade, and that's what being Métis means. So yeah, when Maureen mentioned that I was going to talk a little bit, I was going to stress a little bit, because we're here to listen from Robert Ducette today. I'm so thankful for Robert Ducette. We've really created a great relationship through phone calls and coffee at Tim Hortons. He's taught me so much. He's so willing to tell me all the stories and all the history, and he's always got a joke or two in him. So he's really just a great guy. And yeah, so that's just a bit of context. So on the outreach committee, my role is kind of to plan reconciliation events, because through SUNTEP I've met a great deal of really amazing Indigenous people who are doing great work, whether it's authors, teachers, politicians, all types of artists. It's just really, really amazing, the people and the connections I've been able to make. I first met Robert Ducette when I took it was an e-cur class, which is a curriculum class. It was 265, which teaches you about how to teach reconciliation in the classroom. And he came and spoke, and he just had such an energy about him that I just had to grab his information. And then, thinking about the committee and thinking about this amazing community that I love so much, I figured, well, that's what reconciliation looks like. We got to actually go put it into action. So I made some emails. It's really cool when you tell people you organize events. You really just make phone calls and emails. It's very simple. It's not hard at all, but it sounds kind of cool. But I'm yapping up a storm right now, and we're here to learn about some important history and some important things that are happening today. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Robert Ducette. And on behalf of St. Martin's United, I'm going to offer him some tobacco and a thank you card for his time. So let's clap it up for Robert Ducette.
Can I move this, brother, for the coffee? Right here?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no worries.
Take a sip every now and then. Atlantate, Nancy, and good morning to St. Martin's United Congregation. And thank you, Nick. You almost make me sound saintly by the way you've the way you introduce me, but I can assure you I'm no saint. I'm just a man. So I want to thank all of you for giving me this time to make a presentation on Métis issues as it relates to our people and land. I also want to say this as I speak at every I guess every event that I go to. I do not represent the interests or views of all Indigenous people. What I'm saying here today is my view, and somebody else might have a different view of it. So I want to make that very clear that, you know, sometimes when you go to events and you listen to a First Nations or an Inuit or a Métis person, a lot of people leave that thinking, well, they must be all thinking the same thing. But quite frankly, we do not. So I just want to make that clear that I don't represent that. And hopefully today some of the stories will resonate with you. So I'm going to try and do this in 30 minutes. Nick, do you think? Is that okay? 30 minutes? Well, we'll be here for 3 hours. I'm a former politician. Well, look, they're all checking their watches now. We'll try and get through this. Just quickly, for those who don't know me, I'm a fifth generation from Clan Mackay, from Buffalo Narrows. My ancestors were Dene Cree people. They call themselves half-breeds. In our language, they would say apitegosin, which means half-breed. And so it wasn't until recently that the word Métis was being used up in northern Saskatchewan. And we're not ashamed of saying half-breed. I know a lot of people don't say that word because it sounds like it's less than, you're denigrating yourself. But historically speaking, in Manitoba, there were Métis, and then there were Scotch and English half-breeds. And there are people that still call themselves that today. So if I use the word half-breed, please don't take it wrong, okay? They were trappers, hunters, and gatherers, and my family also called themselves people who moved with the season in Cree, because they were moving from place to place in northern Saskatchewan. In the spring, they would be in one place. In the summer, fall, and the winter, they would all be in different spots. And so in Cree, they also call themselves people who moves with the season. The Mackays are primarily from Buffalo Narrows. Our traditional territory was on the Muskoka River, and that's in northwest Saskatchewan, north of Middle Lake. It's now a bombing range where NATO pilots are learning how to strafe and bomb, just in case there's a war. Yeah. So, my family, my Mushum and Cookham applied for their Métis scripts, and they did not get them. My great-great-grandmother was Angela Marie Lariviere. She signed on to Treaty 10 in Isle Cross in 1906. I'm a 60 scoop child. I was taken away when I was 4 months old, and I was placed in a Ducette home, hence the name Ducette. I took their name out of respect because I lived in that home for 18 years, and they all live there now. They still live there. I'm the only one that has moved away from Prince Albert, so they're all living on 3rd Street right now, 10th Avenue. Went to university in Saskatoon and Brandon, and in 1989, I was the most fortunate gentleman to meet this beautiful Dene woman called Betty Garr. And we've been together ever since, 36 years. We had 3 children together, Brady, Brianna, and Julia, sorry. And I have been married once, and my daughter actually, her name is Kyra Wilson. And just recently, 2 months ago, she was elected Grand Chief of the Manitoba Assembly of Chiefs. So she is the leader of First Nations in Manitoba. So in a way, I guess I'm creating an Indigenous Kennedy's family in Western Canada. So hopefully not. I hope I don't get shot. So I'm a published author, public speaker, as you can tell, and I was an elected official with the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan over 30 years. 10 of those years being president of the organization and leading the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan through some good times and some turbulent times. I'll just say that. So that brings me to this point. Métis and half-breed people were treated the same as First Nations and Inuit. We were all sent to residential schools. We were all taken at day schools. And during the 60 scoop, we were all taken away. The children were taken away, and we were also kicked off our traditional territories, as an example. And I'm going to talk a bit about that today. The oldest community in Saskatchewan is the Métis community, Cumberland House, 1774. That's the oldest community in Saskatchewan. And Métis people are culture, languages, and traditions are as diverse as First Nations. And for example, it's my own opinion, there are 3 types of Métis and half-breed people in Saskatchewan. There's the Plains Métis people, the buffalo hunters. There's the Central Métis, where we're on this territory right now. Actually, there was an old guy by the name of Patrice Fleury. Through a testimonial in 1929, he said that in what is now Saskatoon, it was called Bois de Flèche for the Métis people, and it was one of their traditional hunting territories. South of Saskatoon is a place called Round Prairie, and during the mid-1800s, it was actually called Moose Woods, and an explorer by the name of Palliser bumped into it when he was lost, and the Métis people gave him fresh horses and helped him out and fed him, and well, I guess they sent him packing, I don't know. So he overstayed his welcome. So Métis people speak every language that First Nations do, including Plains and Northern Michif. And my grandparents that I didn't meet could speak 5 languages and could read 3. And that didn't mean they were geniuses. It was just a normal thing for our people in northern Saskatchewan, because there was so much diversity in northern Saskatchewan with Dene and Cree, Michif people, English and French. So they spoke quite a few languages and could read 3. Métis people have different forms of government. In the prairie, you would have the laws of the hunt. That's what governed our brothers and sisters to the south. But in northern Saskatchewan, we didn't have that. We didn't have the laws of the hunt. And a lot of people think that, again, that Métis people, you see the laws of the hunt, you hear about it, and automatically you think, well, that's Métis. And it is, but in northern Saskatchewan, we didn't have that. Although there is wood bison up there, and actually the largest free-roaming herd of wood bison right now is actually in the Primrose Lake bombing range on that northeast corner where our traditional territory is. There's about 800 or 900 of them roaming around there right now. It's a really big herd. So, but we didn't govern ourselves like that in the north. We lived individually with our families on a trap line, and we did not develop laws like the Prairie Métis. So, our parents guided and our grandparents guided our decisions. Unlike today, with the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan, it is more a European-based sort of government. It has 3 branches. It has 3 branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. And the organization is registered as a nonprofit. Métis and Happy people are recognized under the Canadian Constitution under Section 35 as our Inuit and First Nation. However, and now here's the however, the federal government still views our rights and their obligations to Métis and Indian and Inuit people differently. And I'm going to talk about this. There's no access to land claim process. And the Métis do not have the same level of access to resources provided to First Nations and Inuit people. But we do pay all the taxes. Yeah, we do. We pay all the taxes that everybody else does. We don't have a land base where like First Nations, where you don't pay no taxes. Métis people pay all the taxes. And we're okay with that. There's no problem, right? We're all part of Canada. So we don't have a problem with that. But it has caused problems for us. And I think if you've heard this story, I'm sorry. Just as an example, I was at the dentist with my daughter, Julia. She was like 6 or 7 years old, and we were getting our teeth fixed. And under the First Nations Health Inuit branch of the government, and also with their treaty that they signed with Canada, health is one of the things that are supposed to be provided for English River First Nation. So we're getting our teeth done, and I'm at the front, and I'm pulling out my wallet to pay for my work, my dental work. And my daughter Julia is going, "Dad, why are you paying for your teeth being fixed?" And I said, "Well, my girl, your grandfather, J.B. Garr, signed Treaty 10 in Isla Crosse, and because of that, you get your teeth fixed because it was a deal between the Canadian government and your family." I said, "My family, your other grandpa on the Métis side, that didn't happen." And she says, "Well, that's not right." And she actually had her own status card. So she told the dentist, "Here, put this on my card for my dad." Well, the dentist just looked at her and laughed and says, no, that's not how it goes. The Daniel Supreme Court decision on behalf of Métis people, we were just recent, well, it's not recently, I think 13 years ago, we're supposed to be now recognized under 9124 as First Nations and Inuit, but I can tell you, friends, that it's still not happening. It's still not happening. The government of Canada is not recognizing Métis for the purposes of 9124. And just recently, you probably would have heard about Bill C-53 and the Métis Treaty, the recognition of Métis government self-determination and self-government. There were a lot of problems with that treaty. And the biggest problem with that treaty that they were talking about for the last 9-10 months was that it didn't include land. Didn't include land. It was just a document that talked about making sure that resources kept going to our governments. And what good is a treaty without land? right? It's nothing, really. So, which brings me to this now, and this might sound a little, I'm going to try and tell this as a story, I guess. So, my grandfather, like I said, his name was Geordie Mackay, and he was born in 1919 in Alacross. He is the son of Celestine Mackay and Lucia Aubuchon. And Celestine Mackay was a trapper and a fisherman and a gatherer who lived in Alacross his entire life and was married to Lucia Aubuchon. And so the reason I'm telling you this story is to give you some context about what happened to one family, my family, as Métis people as it relates to land. In 1906, our family participated Celestine participated in the Half-Breed Claims Commission Treaty 10, hearings held in La Crosse, and at the hearing, Celestine swore an affidavit attesting that he was eligible to be recognized as a half-breed for the purposes of the commission and entitled to receive benefits by that commission. And so even then they were saying, they were calling it the Half-Breed Commission of Treaty 10. They didn't call it the Métis Commission, they called it the Half-Breed one. On his affidavit, he swore that his mother was Angela Marie Riviere and his father was Henry Mackay. And Angela was born in 1858 in Alacrosse, and she married Henry, and they had 3 children, Clara, Celestine, and Ambrose. Celestine's older sister, Clara McCollum, she took Métis scrip also in Alacrosse in 1906, as did Ambrose, his brother. So what happens is that Celestine took a treaty, allegedly, he was eligible for a Métis scrip, and he opted for a land scrip. And what that meant was that if you wanted to have land, like 240 acres, that's what they were offered by the Canadian government to extinguish their Aboriginal title. That's what he opted for. Some people opted for a money scrip of $240, and in 1910, that would have probably been a lot of money. That would have been a lot of money in 1910. But my grandfather opted for a land scrip. But there are no records which indicate that Celestine Mackay actually received his land scrip note by the Half-Breed Commission on behalf of the federal government of Canada and enacted into Celestine's possession. So this is where the story takes a really twisted sort of a twist, I guess. So my mushroom, my grandfather Celestine, holds on to this Métis land scrip for 4 years, from 1906 to 1910. And then he gets this idea, after holding it onto it for 4 years, that he was going to apply his Métis scrip land note and get some land. And he, in January of 1910, got the idea in the dead of winter to walk 717 kilometers from Alacrosse to Moose Jaw, because that's where the Scrip Commission office was. And when he got there, allegedly again, there was a person by the name of James Milligan who filed a Land Titles Act to transfer the document, and he attested that he personally was present and did see Celestine Mackay sign this document, and that was executed in the province of Saskatchewan and Moose Jaw, and that he knew Celestine Mackay, and he is, in my belief, to be full age of 21 years, sworn before me, 19th day of January 1910. And the same time that this was happening, there was another gentleman by the name of, I'll get to that, James Mason. And James Mason gets his transfer form, number 363, and designates his land selection, and I won't read the designation, but I'll tell you where it is. It was designated to land south of Kindersley by the Alberta border, and it was 240 acres that this James Mason took. James Mason and James Milligan were both from Lethbridge. And they say on the form that Celestine Mackay transfers the state and interest in a piece of land for the grand sum of $1. So, My Mushroom Celestine Mackay, happy as a clam at the bottom of the ocean, puts his $1 back in his pocket and walks back to Isle of Cross from Moose Jaw, 717 kilometers in the dead of winter, and lives happily ever after with his family. Now, the problem with all of this is that the Department of the Interior rules for people to transfer a Métis script like that. There are 3 rules. The person has to be there, and the rights cannot be assigned to another party until the Métis person assigns the document to a piece of land. The third thing is the grantee must be an adult in order to assign to transfer the rights or interest of the land. And the problem that Métis people were having, the ones that were in northern Saskatchewan, is that the Department of the Interior said that if you wanted your land, you had to assign it to land in southern Saskatchewan, where all the farmland was, where all the land was that was surveyed. It had to be surveyed land. And even today in northern Saskatchewan, you won't see much surveyed land up there. So why would my grandfather, a trapper, hunter, and a gatherer, take his Métis script down to southern Saskatchewan? It never happened. Celestine Mackay did not leave northwest Saskatchewan in his lifetime, and his eldest granddaughter, my mother Diane Ludwig, signed an affidavit to that effect that he did not leave northern Saskatchewan in his lifetime. Celestine did not go to Moose Jaw and transfer his estate. And you know the thing when there's when you in 1910 or 1906 when they had this Métis Script Commission, you had to sign an affidavit. And of course, when you transfer your title to land, I'm sure that some of us own houses or land here. You have to sign a document, right? Well, when we looked at the signature on the Métis Script affidavit and the title, the signatures were different. So, Celestine Mackay was 27 years old at the time of the alleged transfer of his estate and interest. And the Land Titles Act transfer affidavit sworn by James Milligan says he was 21. So our family got swindled. That's the bottom line. We were swindled. And we didn't receive the benefits of that Métis script. So I would say this, that I think that Canada is liable for the conduct and negligence, and I would use the word, this might be a strong word, malfeasance of individuals who were at material times Crown employees, agents, and servants who were supposed to protect Métis people from this stuff. And they didn't do that. They didn't do that. And there are books that talk about how as high as 95 or about 95% of Métis people were defrauded out of their Métis script. Actually, there was this one book that I was reading about Treaty 10 elders, and they were talking about Métis people when they took a money script. And there was one elder, he bought a bag of sugar, and they were canoeing along across the Churchill, and he had a bag of sugar, and he was pouring it into the river because he said he wanted to make the water as sweet as the sugar. So they didn't really know the value of that, right? Another time they actually took a $5 bill and lit their campfire on, just to start their campfire with a $5 bill in 1906. So the sad thing about all of this is that J.A. McKenna, the Half-Breed Claims Commissioner, signed off on this affidavit recognizing Celestine Mackay as an individual who could receive the 240 acres. But there are no official records which indicate Canada and their agents personally delivered or handed my grandfather. Well, actually, the word is chop on. Chop on, great-grandfather. My chop on actually received that note. And it's really sad because we didn't find the land designation in southern Saskatchewan. And we actually went by there to see the land that we owned, you know. But unfortunately, we did not. How am I doing for time? We're good? What time is it? 15 minutes? 5 more minutes left? All right, 5 minutes. So it's my contention, friends, that the transaction was fraudulent because the rules of applying a Metis script, as I've said, stipulate that the bearer of the script note has to be present there, and you have to be old enough to sign it over. He did not receive that. And in assuming that the government has exclusive jurisdiction over Aboriginal people, Canada undertook a fiduciary responsibility to Aboriginal people, including the descendants of my family. And so a fiduciary duty means like they have to look after us in a good way. That's what that means. It's a fiduciary duty. In addition, Canada is bound by the principles of the honor of the Crown, and at the very least, a duty of fairness, good faith, and political trust and honorable conduct towards Aboriginal people, including the descendants, my descendants, the Mackay family. And in light of the adoption of the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, UNDRIP, and by the principles of the honor of the Crown is also bound to provide redress to the descendants of the Mackay family, my family. So I would say this. The descendants of Celestine Mackay, namely myself and the rest of my family, by virtue of their Aboriginal status and historical protection recognized by Section 35 of the Canadian Constitution, was entitled to the protection of their cultural heritage and well-being by Canada. But that didn't happen. Didn't happen. And Canada either knew or ought to have known that by pressing and allowing Celestine Mackay and his descendants to opt into Treaty 10 or ask them to be included in the Half-Breed Commission, it would have future consequences, including the right of the descendants to preserve, maintain, and nurture their Aboriginal identity and exercising their Aboriginal culture and rights. But what it ultimately led to for my family and the Mackays was the loss of birth names, the loss of our identity, the loss of our family relationships because many of them were taken away, either through the residential school, day school, and myself in the 60s scoop, loss of self-esteem and self-worth, and forced cultural assimilation. And you know, I would say this. There was an inability, I think, at times to appreciate the fundamental values of the way of our Aboriginal people and our families. Because even today, when I'm walking down the street, I meet one of my relations. I'm 63 years old. And it'll be the first time that I've met them. Can you imagine that? Meeting one of your family, your direct family. Has that happened to anybody in here? Recently? Yeah, what was it, a cousin or? Yeah, so, well, you must be Indigenous if you've got 60 first cousins. Oh yes, well, I'm part Scottish. I'm a Mackay, Northern Highlands, and that's way up there at the northern tip of Scotland. So, just to make things even more muddled, my grandmother, Angela Marie Le Riviere, according to the Metis script affidavits, took treaty. And so, actually, some of my family have opted to try for their treaty. I have not. But the Canadian government is not recognizing the 3 affidavits of Celestine, Ambrose, and Clara. They're saying they're just totally disregarding it. Totally disregarding it. And so they are not recognizing that Angela Marie Le Riviere took treaty. So, this is Canada. So this is one tragic example of how Métis people were defrauded out of their birthright, ultimately has led to one of Canada's Indigenous people not benefiting from their homeland. And I would say this to you, and I'm really appreciative when people recognize we're on the Treaty 6 and the homeland of the Métis. I often ask myself, Why do we recognize that we're on the homeland of the Métis when the Métis have no home? First Nations have land. Non-Indigenous people have land. Even newcomer Canadians that are coming from all over the world have land in this country. The only people that are landless are the Métis people, except for the land with the Métis settlements in Alberta that was set aside in 1944. In Saskatchewan, Métis people do not have sections of land like First Nations do with their reserves, I guess, for lack of a better term. That doesn't exist. So, and at times, it seems that it feels like we're less an Indigenous person, and yet we're all under the Canadian Constitution without any justice or respect for our historic issues or place in this country. So I would say this with my 5 minutes. In conclusion, the future of Métis people is evolving at an accelerated pace today. On the surface, it looks like the Métis are making huge strides. They have more resources flowing into Métis governments across Canada. They sit at negotiating tables they've never had access to previously, and seemingly they have the ear of the current federal government on Métis issues, except one issue: land. That's the only issue that the federal government does not want to talk about. And neither does the provincial government, for that matter. They don't want to talk about it. We've got all this land in this country. We're the second largest country in the world. Can't you just give us like a little bit? I mean, we were here before everybody. Well, not here before First Nations. Our relations were here before us, and then, you know, some good-looking Scottish guy met a good-looking Dene woman, and next thing you know, you got a great big family of Mackays. And, you know, the oldest communities are the Métis communities, Cumberland House and Isle Cross in Saskatchewan. You know, all the money the federal government and provincial governments give presently, you know, it can be taken away if the Treasury Board does not allocate or have the budget line for Métis people or governments. But the one thing that is consistent and is forever, that's land. Land is forever. And it allows you to build your resources for your people. It's your home, and it's who you are. Like I said today, you have the Plains Métis people, you have the Central Métis people, and you have the Northern people. That's how they identify themselves. Today, there is one way, though. There is a way, and I don't want to leave people thinking that there isn't a way to resolve this issue. There is a way to resolve this issue, and the current lack of movement on addressing Métis land issues. The federal government has a process called the Specific and Comprehensive Land Claims Process. In this process, you can send a correspondence to the commissioners of this process, outline your land issue, and they have to respond to your claim. But the federal government is saying that, well, however, this process, I would say, I'll just say this, however, this process is only open to First Nations and Inuit people. It does not recognize Métis people. It will not recognize it. And as a result, Métis land issues go unresolved, and every time we want justice on our issues, we have to go to court and litigate, and for sometimes 30 years. One gentleman did actually send a correspondence to that process, Ambrose Maurice from Canoe Lake. And they kicked it back and they said, no, we're not dealing with that. And so he went to court, and the federal government negotiated a settlement with him out of court. I don't know how much money it was, but there actually was one person that did that. And it's quite sad because for my family, the Mackays, we were defrauded out of our Métis scrip, and we lived on that northeast corner of the Muskoka River for generations. And in 1952, we were removed out of there because they wanted that bombing range. And First Nations and non-Indigenous people got compensated, but the Métis people did not. So, and I'm not blaming anybody here, and I hope I didn't ruin your Sunday by telling you the sob story. But I think if the federal government placed a Métis in this process, it would go a long way in resolving Métis land issues and save Canadian and Métis taxpayers millions of dollars, and not including the trauma it inflicts every time Métis people want to redress we want to redress on our land issue. And just one further thing, a happy and a sad note. I talked to the congregation the last time about the Metis 60 scoop and how we had to go to court to find some justice with this. And just recently, on April 29th of this year, the federal court in Toronto with Justice Sebastian Gramont ruled in favor of the Metis 60 scoop survivors and said that the federal government has to deal with them now, one way or the other. It was a victory for us, seemingly. But of course, you know how the courts are. The courts ruled that, yes, Métis, the federal government has to deal with the Métis, but they narrowed it. And they said that only the Métis children that were taken away during the Adopt an Indian Métis program from 1967, 68, and 69 were eligible for redress. So that means a person like myself that was born before 1967 will not be eligible to be part of that process. And the kids that were born after in 1969 will not be eligible for that process. And so we had a press conference here about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and my sister, Eileen, was standing beside me. She was brought into the Ducette home in 67. So Eileen, Jolene, and Harold will be eligible for redress of their grievances. But myself, Patsy, and Corrine, the other 3 children that were in the Ducette home, will not. And I think that's a black eye in this country. And it makes me really sad, because for 30 years I've been fighting that issue, only to be left out a second time now. And I don't know what I'm going to do. Because, you know, of course, when you fight the government, you're fighting big money. And if you want to go to court, it's going to take another, well, sometimes 20 or 30 years and millions of dollars. They're actually using our taxpayers' money to fight us, which is, I find, kind of ironic. But I hope this helps you to understand where Métis are currently situated in the Canadian landscape as it relates to our culture and that, and also to our land issue. And if you have any questions, please ask. And it's been my honor to spend this time with you this morning. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. And in my language, thank you is Marcy Chu. So if there are any questions, I'm willing to answer them right now. Thank you, brother. Okay.
So do we have any questions?
And it doesn't necessarily have to be related to land or anything. It could be anything.
I have to apologize for my voice. I'm doing student teaching, and kids don't cover their coughs.
Well, thank you so much, Robert, for coming and speaking to us again. It's just so informative what you bring us. And I'd just like to say as well, when I introduced myself to you before the presentation, you spoke to me as sister, and so I'd like to say I've got to you, brother. I have a question. Like, we do talk about the homeland, that we worship on the homeland of the Métis. Is there a more appropriate term that we could use in church that would more closely just really be representative of what we're trying to say? Because you say we do acknowledge the treaties, and actually that's a brand new map that we just have over there showing the treaty areas, because we feel that's really important, that needs to be sort of front and center in our sanctuary. But do you think, is there a better way for us to talk, to acknowledge, when we acknowledge the Métis people?
Yeah, well, I want to say thank you to you. We're all sisters and brothers, and I'll always say that. I want to say to St. Martin's congregation, this is such a lovely, you're awesome people, and I wish Canada was all like you, honestly, because this would be such a better place for us, and I just wanted to say that to you, because whenever I come here, I feel warm and welcome, and you're inviting to different ideas. And I think that's really important for this country. I would say, you know what, no, keep using the word homeland until we actually see something, right? And it is Treaty 6. And so, you know what, I just think that using those two terms are okay. It just seems odd for me that we recognize the homeland of the Métis, but yet we're the only group of people in Canada that doesn't actually have a home. You know, I'm laughing about it, but I mean that's the way I see it. You know, I know maybe I shouldn't be laughing about it, but that's just one of our ways to deal with our sort of lack of recognition is to giggle about things like that.
I guess it's sort of the thing, if you have a choice of laughing or crying, maybe sometimes it's better to laugh too, but no, it's like I had no idea when I'm listening to you that this is what some of these issues related to land, because I think we are becoming more informative about the Indigenous people that our Indigenous sisters and brothers, that we aren't as aware of the situation of our Métis sisters and brothers.
And you know, the thing is, one of the reasons why I accepted this invite from Nick and the congregation is because this was a level 200 Métis class, and so all of you will have to leave $200 at the door when you leave for your tuition. I know. Okay. I think it's really important for this country. We need advocates and allies and people that understand what's going on in this country. And so that's one of the main reasons that I came. I hope I didn't bore you, and I hope I didn't make you sad about what has happened in my family, because that was not my intention. But sometimes when we talk about these things, they're very hard, and people don't understand that this is still going on in this country. And this word reconciliation, right? We're all using this in this country right now. And they always have a big R for reconciliation in their speaking notes. For me, reconciliation right now in Canada is a small r. Until Canada honors that promise to my family for that 240 acres of land, I don't recognize that reconciliation, because there is no reconciliation without accommodation. With rights for everybody in this country, there's responsibility. And a responsibility, because when I was growing up and I thought I was non-Indigenous, one of the values that I was taught was that when you make a deal or when you make a handshake, you live up to it. Or didn't we all learn that when we were growing up? That was one of the values that we learned as people. And so, you know, I just say to you, thank you for listening, because, you know, maybe, I don't know who's your MP now, Redicop? No. Toker? Well, I don't know who it is. But Kevin Waugh? Yeah. Well, maybe someday when you bump into Kevin Waugh and say, I want you to treat those Métis people better, and this is how I want you to do it. And point your finger at him like that. Sorry about pointing my finger at you. So.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you, sister. Are there any other questions about Métis culture, language, anything? I'll answer it right there, brother.
Okay. I've been wondering how it happened in Alberta, that there was land designated there, but not here.
Yes. Okay, that's a very good question. So, just a minute. I need to take a sip of this. In the 1940s, in the province of Alberta, they had this thing called they had this commission going around, because they had a lot of landless Métis people living on road allowance. And so they wanted to deal with that. So they had this Alberta Métis Commission going around talking to Métis people and people in general. And they came up with this idea to help Métis people. They would set aside, like First Nations reserves, they would set aside big settlements. That's what they called them. And there was 10 settlements that they set aside in Alberta, but 2 have been rescinded. You know the city of St. Paul, or St. Albert? Well, that was a Métis settlement at one time. And they rescinded it. They took away that land from the Métis, and they were prospering there. And it's really quite another story that that we don't have time today. But the Alberta government then in 1944 enacted what they called the Métis Betterment Act, and they set aside all those parcels of land. South of Lac La Biche, there's a settlement called Kikino-Caslin, and it's a beautiful place. And the Métis people are thriving there because they have land. They have farms, you know, they work off their land. They are doing really well. I'm not saying things are peaches and cream there. I mean, every community has issues, right, with addictions and everything. But at least they have land and their families are thriving there. And if I could just say this, it was really sad because when they put that land aside for the Métis in Alberta, the Alberta government was supposed to have a separate trust for all of the oil and gas and the timber and everything they were taking off of it from 1944, but they weren't doing that. What they were doing was they were putting all the revenue into general trust fund and spending it on the province. And so the Métis, again, had to go to court, and they won a settlement for I think it was like $500 million, and they got some more land because the provincial government of Alberta didn't do the right thing. In Saskatchewan, around the same time, I think, I don't know if it was Tommy Douglas, 1944. Tommy Douglas came into power in 1944. They set aside these things called Métis farms. There were Métis farms in Cumberland and Isle Cross, Mortlack, Duck Lake, LeBret, and Green Lake. And in Green Lake, they actually had set aside 6 townships of land for the exclusive use of the Métis. But now, what did they do? The government clawed all that land back, and they took all that land back from the Métis. There are no more Métis farms. There is a Métis farm, and it's still LeBret, but it's a corporation now. It doesn't have any protection, and if they don't pay their taxes, they could lose that land. So it's not like a First Nations where they can lose that land for non-payment of taxes. So the province of Saskatchewan from 1944 to modern times has taken that land back from the Métis people, including Green Lake. In Manitoba, you had the land claim there, which they seemingly won, but they still haven't actually addressed those land issues in Manitoba. Métis people are still landless in Manitoba, the province they created. So that's actually like a synopsis of what happened in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. It's too bad, because you see in Alberta, with all those Métis settlements, that they're benefiting from the revenue from oil and gas and timber, gravel. They are doing so well. I lived there in 1982. I actually played for their hockey team. It was called the Red Army. So I'm the only person in Canada that played for the Red Army. Everybody else plays against them. But after that settlement, they were building brand new schools and brand new homes, and people were living there so well. It's beautiful, man. Yeah. So it just goes to show, if people have land, they have wealth. And I think we all understand that. Yeah. Any other question? Okay. Thank you very much. Have to get your parka.